There's a very specific subgenre of K-dramas that I want to talk about. An aesthetically pleasing slice of life story that follows a protagonist who falls for a character that I call the toxic ethereal crush. There have been 3 shows with this premise in the last couple of years. Nevertheless, The Interest of Love and Doona. All 3 of these K-dramas have a similar tone and visual style. These are character-driven K-dramas that explore relationships that are as intoxicating as they are toxic. These are not fluffy, heartwarming love stories. These relationships are like a car accident you can't look away from. A hazy, backlit car accident, shot in slow motion with a great soundtrack playing in the background. This K-drama subgenre is shot in a heightened, visually appealing style, but the story itself is grounded in reality. Relationships are shown as they are in real life, with all the messiness and disappointments. In a way, this type of show is an anti-K-drama. You will not find any cheesy rom-com tropes here. What do we call this genre? Aesthetic realism? These K-dramas are really well made on a technical level. The plot is structured logically, there are no glaring plot holes, the themes are cohesive, the casting and acting are phenomenal, and the music is amazing. But watching this genre leaves that bitter aftertaste in your mouth. Despite the high-quality production, these K-dramas are considered bad by a lot of viewers. And in this video essay, I want to discuss why. The toxic crush archetype is incredibly attractive. Everyone they ever met had a crush on them, and this character is fully aware of their beauty. The toxic crush is not just a pretty face with no personality though. They are the creative artsy type. Jeon, from Nevertheless, is going to art school and seems to be good at every art form he tries. Doona is a popular and talented singer, songwriter, and dancer. Soo-young, from The Interest of Love, likes to paint and plays the piano in her spare time. In the beginning, this character seems innocent, always doing something cute and childish. Watching Doona play the claw machine and getting excited about a toy is endearing. Soo-young looks so pure when she's trying to save a bird. And Jeon draws a cute little butterfly on Nabi's arm when they meet for the first time. This K-drama stock character works equally well as a man and as a woman, which is not common. Usually, the way K-drama characters are written is very gendered. Even though the toxic crush is confident and has a lot of admirers, this is a loner who doesn't have any close friends and nobody knows what they are thinking. Despite their popularity, they lack genuine connections. This character is depressed, but not in a didn't brush teeth for a week way. The toxic crush is depressed in the aesthetic Lana Del Rey Tumblr post way, with a glass of expensive wine and perfect eyeliner. Dating this type of person is like playing with fire. They are always sending mixed signals, even though they have feelings for the protagonist. One moment, they are caring and loving, but then they suddenly become distant, and later switch back to being flirty and then serious, confusing the main character. The toxic crush takes 1 step forward and 2 steps back. If they confess their feelings, it will be in a super mean way that sounds more like a rejection than a confession. They are somehow simultaneously needy and reserved. The red flags are there from the start, but our protagonist ignores them. Loving this character is an emotional roller coaster which is tiring but rewarding. The highs are like fireworks and the lows are devastating. This is not a stable and secure relationship based on trust. These K-dramas demonstrate really well how people end up in toxic relationships. This type of character doesn't respect other people's boundaries and keeps pushing to see how far they can take it. Soo-young is more reserved and introverted. But the other two are more creepy and like inviting themselves without a warning. Jaeon keeps appearing in front of Nabi's apartment whenever he wants, and even calls an ambulance to break into her home when she doesn't answer her phone for 5 seconds. Doona doesn't need to break any doors, since she and Wonjun are roommates, so she just randomly goes into his room to sit on his bed. A toxic crush also loves disappearing without a warning and ghosting people, but will be very upset if others don't pick up their calls. The ethereal crush character is usually a very bad communicator. Despite claiming that they know exactly what they want and are upfront about their intentions, they actually change their mind several times per episode, or sometimes even within one conversation. The relationship is always on their terms. If a toxic crush rejects the main character, they will be offended when the protagonist moves on and starts dating someone else. Turns out, they are incredibly jealous and not as cool as they like to think. This character archetype seems confident at first glance, but they are deeply insecure. They can't just let go and trust that another person will be fully into them. The toxic crush can't live up to the idealized image of themselves and is afraid that nobody would like the real and messy version of them. And oh, are they messy. Jaeon is a typical boy who flirts and makes out with everyone he can. Sorry babe, I can't stay and cuddle with you, I have a date with another woman in 5 minutes. Soo-young is not much better. She cheats on her boyfriend with the male lead and comes up with an unconventional solution to fix this mistake. She lies about sleeping with a third guy in hopes of getting rid of the love triangle. An absolutely insane plan which doesn't work, by the way, because the male lead does not give up on her. Doona is moody and has anger management issues, but at least she doesn't cheat. Her biggest mistake in the show is leaving Wonjun behind to talk with her manager and disappearing without an explanation. Ouch. In her defense, she did not do it for fun. She went there to confront the man that has been grooming her and manipulating her for years. But she could have done this without hurting the protagonist, so still toxic. The female lead from The Interest of Love explained this destructive approach to relationships really well. As a child, whenever she made sandcastles at the beach, she was worried someone would destroy them after she went home. So she always destroyed them herself first. That way, she doesn't have to worry that someone else will ruin what she has built. In these K-dramas, the toxic crush is slowly demystified, as the plot spends time on their backstory, revealing a deeply flawed person. In The Interest of Love, we gradually find out that Soo-young's depression stems from the death of her younger brother, the person who was closest to her. She also has a messy relationship with her parents and can't trust men because her father cheated on her mother. Later, we find out that it was actually the mom who cheated, making Soo-young realize that she is doomed to repeat her parents' mistakes. Soo-young makes up with her family, quits her job and disappears by the end of the show, and uses that time to work on herself and figure out what she wants to do with her life. She opens a drawing cafe and lives the life she wants, but the one thing she is not able to do is move on from Sang-soo. Nevertheless, barely explores Jaeon's backstory. We do get a few snippets of information, like the fact that he has lived separately from his mom from the age of 10. While they are still on good talking terms and she supports him financially, it doesn't look like he was emotionally taken care of at all, which does explain a lot. For dialogue, we also find out that he wants to become a better person and is self-aware. The last episode reveals that he fell in love with Nabi when he saw her at the museum, during the most embarrassing moment of her life, which makes all of his actions seem even worse in retrospect. Him just having fun and casually dating is less evil than playing games and intentionally sleeping around to rile up the woman he was supposedly in love with all along. By the end of the show, we still don't know that much about Jaeon and don't fully understand why he makes these decisions. I wish this character was explored better. He should have gotten more voiceover and flashbacks. Doona's backstory is explored pretty well in her K-drama. She has a broken relationship with her mother, who only knows how to criticize her and take her daughter's money. In a flashback scene, we see that her mom dropped Doona off as a child at grandma's house and generally seems uninterested in her kid. When the female lead is in 8th grade, her only caretaker dies. At this vulnerable moment, the manager swoops in and starts grooming her. He promises to take care of Doona and controls what she does, where she lives, and what she wears, and then abandons and ghosts her when she is stressed and can't perform. The manager, the mom, and the public all call Doona selfish and horrible, so she believes it too, and behaves accordingly. She does get better and works on herself as time passes, but the last episode is mostly a montage with very few dialogue scenes, so we don't get to see how she matures. The toxic character archetype is first depicted as a mysterious and carefree being, then they turn into an anti-hero who is torturing the protagonist, and as their backstory is gradually revealed, they become a regular flawed human being who makes bad decisions. The toxic crush is put on a pedestal, which can only disappoint our protagonist. In all three of these shows, the story is primarily told from the perspective of the main character, who is trying to figure out the toxic crush, attempting to solve them like a puzzle, together with the viewers. Doona doesn't start speaking until minute 13 of the first episode, even though the show opens with her. The male lead's first scene shows her face before we can see him. She is ever present but doesn't get to speak for herself. When June gets to talk right away, Doona is usually shown through an idealized gaze, so the story feels like it is told from the male lead's perspective. The interest of love starts with Sang-soo watching Soo-young at work. The scene is filmed in a dreamy, ethereal way. When the story starts, we hear his voiceover, and also see an interaction between the two in which she doesn't talk. Before we ever hear the female lead speak, we see a couple of scenes establishing what kind of person Sang-soo is, and hear several background characters talk about Soo-young. We first hear the female lead talk around minute 9 of the show. Nevertheless, has a similar approach. The K-drama starts with the female lead's backstory. When Jaeon first appears on screen at minute 14 of the first episode, his face is not revealed right away. First, we see the reactions of random women swooning over him. He touches Nabi before they ever interact, and then he starts talking. When his face is finally visible, the camera pans up from his lips to his eyes. We can hear Nabi's inner monologue and the conversations they have, but we hardly ever find out what Jaeon is thinking. Who gets to tell the story directly shapes the audience's perception of who's the villain and who's the victim. The POV character gets to control the narrative and paints themselves in a sympathetic light. A lot of the toxic crush's actions look cruel at first glance. Later, it is revealed that everything is more complicated than it first appears, but by then, the audience's opinion is already set against them. For example, we see Soo-young being rude to her family way before we figure out what the conflict is about. The protagonist in The Interest of Love doesn't reveal his own mistakes to the audience that easily. He also tells the story out of order and sometimes purposely omits crucial information. Sang-soo paints Soo-young as a selfish bitch before we hear her side of the story. He also says that he likes her because she never says no and he routinely follows her at night. I guess he didn't watch my video essay about stalking in K-dramas, because otherwise, he would know that this is not green flag boyfriend behavior. The POV character in all three of these shows also makes bad choices. But because the story is told from their perspective, their actions seem justified. Nabi has a history of toxic relationships and won't back away despite the giant red flags. Wonjun goes out with several women simultaneously, but he's the good guy who is sensible and mature, so he's allowed to. Sang-soo starts dating a woman he clearly doesn't love, but thinks he's some sort of hero for giving her a chance. He is as toxic as Seyoung. He cheats on his girlfriend and breaks up with her on her birthday. He also doesn't take no for an answer when Seyoung rejects him the first 20 times. But the narrative isn't just shaped by the main character's storytelling. It's equally influenced by their gaze and the lens through which they, along with the camera, perceive their toxic crush. The toxic crush character is somehow always backlit and surrounded by a warm hazy glow, even when they're doing the most mundane things. This idealized depiction of the character represents the protagonist's gaze. These K-dramas often utilize fractal filters for a dreamy atmosphere. You will also see a lot of very long shots of characters looking out of the window in silence, which perfectly matches the slow pace of the story. Nevertheless and Doona both show a mysterious older toxic man from a female lead's past in a particular way. Their eyes are not shown, instead we see close-ups of their lips and hands. They are depicted in an intimate but depersonalized way, like fragments of painful memories. Also typical for this genre are close-up shots of eyes and lips that emphasize the chemistry between the protagonists. Even though some episodes of these shows are rated 19+, and are considered scandalous and provocative by K-drama standards, all intimate scenes are shot in an incredibly classy and tasteful way that doesn't reveal too much. These K-dramas also use a lot of nature symbolism, despite all three shows taking place in Seoul. In Nevertheless, we have the butterfly imagery. From the female lead's name, Nabi, to the male lead's tattoo and pet butterflies that he can't let go, the metaphor keeps repeating throughout the show, symbolizing the beautiful and fragile nature of love. Doona repeatedly uses stray cat imagery. Wonjun takes care of a cat the same way he takes care of Doona. There are several times the camera shows us footage of the cat and then immediately cuts to Doona being alone. In one scene, Wonjun can't find the stray cat, mirroring his relationship with the female lead. The Interest of Love uses plants as a visual representation of Seyoung taking care of herself. When she comes to Seoul, she gets an apartment with a balcony, so she can grow plants like her brother wanted her to. As she loses herself and makes space in her apartment for a man she doesn't love, she throws away the plants, leaving the balcony and herself empty. When she heals, the plants reappear again, including the one Sang-soo gave her. In all three of these TV shows, there is an episode or two in which the female lead returns to her cozy little hometown to get away from big city problems. That's where we often get the classic scene near the ocean. If you're interested in the meaning behind the beach episode, I already made a whole video about it. These K-dramas also have the mandatory cherry blossom scenes, which have to be included in every K-drama, preferably at the beginning of the show, to represent the characters' blossoming feelings. These K-dramas are all so aesthetically pleasing and well written. How come so many people hated these shows? These K-dramas are about messy relationships, and there is always another character who gets hurt, the second lead. This is the most perfect on paper character. They are attractive, kind, reliable, open and honest in their communication, and most importantly, absolutely smitten with the protagonist. The second lead has a history with the main character. They were friends as children or as young adults, which is a typical setup for the childhood connection trope. In K-dramas, this usually means that they end up as a couple, but this specific subgenre subverts this trope. The main character just doesn't have feelings for them and always chooses the toxic partner in the end. This plot development played a big role in the viewer's disappointment with the ending of Nevertheless. Nabi rejects Potato Boy so she can try to build a relationship with the guy who doesn't do relationships. She should have chosen the second lead. Except, this is exactly what happens in The Interest of Love, where pretty early on in the story, both leads get into a relationship with someone else, and the result is even worse. They cheat on their amazing partners and ruin other people's lives, not just their own. This plot point was even more infuriating than the ending of Nevertheless, so the second lead is not the problem. Is this about the ending? In Doona, the couple gets to happily date for a while, but then they can only date in secret, so the open ending is bittersweet and unsatisfying. They should have ended up together definitively. But remember, this is what happens in Nevertheless, and everyone hated that ending. They should have parted ways instead and worked on themselves. But this is how The Interest of Love ends, and people did not like this ending either. The three K-dramas all show different possible outcomes, and neither is satisfying. All of this stress was for nothing. Viewers invest time and emotions into watching TV shows and expect some sort of resolution. But in a doomed romance, nothing really changes. No lessons have been learned. Life just goes on for these characters and there is no happy ever after, just like in real life. K-dramas are a fantasy that help viewers get away from real life problems, and not everyone appreciates realistic relationships on screen. This was supposed to restore our faith in humanity, not remind us that love sucks. Beautifully shot, slow-paced K-dramas about deeply flawed people who are going through life are usually a hit with the viewers, like My Mister or My Liberation Notes. So why are these three shows so unsatisfying to watch? Nevertheless, The Interest of Love and Doona use the aesthetic of a healing K-drama, but don't deliver that everything will be okay and it gets better feeling that slice of life shows are supposed to leave us with. Viewers demand complex and imperfect female protagonists, but when they get one, they hate her. Just because a character makes bad decisions doesn't mean it was a bad K-drama. If you thought that these relationships were not aspirational, good. That was the point.